inspiring words. Before we get to the question and answer period, I just had a couple of announcements I wanted to share with you. And this is the cue or the signal for the marshals with the buckets to get into place. The first announcement is quite an exciting announcement. It is an event that's going to be happening in Lebanon, in Beirut, in the summer, the third week of July. And it is George Galloway Summer University of Palestine, which is the second time that it's happened. And we're hoping to build a large contingent of activists from across Canada to go and to participate in that event this summer. So I want to draw your attention to the tables inside the lobby at the end of the event and make sure that you pick up leaflets so you can find out how you can get involved and be part of the mobilization of activists right across Canada to participate in the Summer University of Palestine. You can imagine what an amazing event this is going to be this summer in the wake of the revolutions that are underway across the region right now. The second announcement is an appeal for support from all of you. As you know, this event has been organized by the Toronto Coalition to Stop the War, and for every single event or struggle that's underway, we have been part of those mobilizations. We organized this event on very short notice because, of course, we wanted to make sure that we had an audience here for Mr. Galloway and a chance to discuss and exchange. So there will be people circulating through the crowd tonight with buckets, and we're going to ask you, if you can, to make a donation to however you can to help us carry on with the work we do. We have one large mobilization coming up on April 9th. It's a rally to end the war and occupation of Afghanistan and to bring home the troops, the Canadian troops from Afghanistan. So if you can make a donation, we encourage you to be generous. The buckets will be passing throughout the question and answer period. So thank you for coming and for being very generous. Bye-bye.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone. We're going to have a question and answer period now. So I'm going to put their hands up really high. I'm going to take 3 questions at a time, and I'm going to observe gender parity. And then Mr. Galloway is going to respond, and then we'll take another group. So, yes, sir, in the striped shirt. So if you, what I'll do is I'll choose you, and then...
A young woman appears oblivious to the fact that I was Britain's leading opponent of the Iran-Iraq war. I was on Iran's side in the Iran-Iraq war. You don't have to believe me. It's a matter of public record, in the parliamentary record and in the public prints. She appears to... There was no YouTube then, between 1980 and 1988, but there was Hansard, which is the parliamentary record. Not only was I aware of Halabja when it was being used as an excuse to kill 1 million Iraqis by Britain and the United States, I was aware of it at the time and was the only Labour Member of Parliament to speak at the first demonstration condemning the use of chemical weapons against the people in Halabja. I just didn't believe that we should starve to death an Iraqi child every 6 minutes of every day and night through sanctions to punish them for having a dictatorship which they didn't elect and couldn't remove, and which in any case we had put into power and armed and financed and supported down all the decades. And equally, I'm not a supporter, as I wasn't a supporter of Saddam Hussein, neither am I a supporter of President Ahmadinejad in Iran. I just don't want the West to make a war against Iran. I don't want the West to bomb your country. I believe that your country has a right to nuclear energy. Indeed, when the tyrant Shah, I don't know if you agree with that appellation, but to me he was the biggest tyrant of them all. When the tyrant Shah, you can't applaud that point, I see. How revealing, how revealing. The tyrant Shah, America begged him to build nuclear power plants using their technology throughout the 1970s. I don't believe that Iran should be sanctioned and threatened for having no nuclear weapons, while Israel can build a mountain of hundreds of nuclear weapons. That's the difference between you and me. The regime in Tehran will be removed or kept according to the masses in Iran. No government is supporting them in the world. There is no power keeping Ahmadinejad in office. He has enemies all over the world, as we have seen this evening. I don't know why you're pursuing me. Pursue him. Pursue him. I don't know why you want me to answer for the regime of Ahmadinejad. Now, the point that was made first about Bahrain, please, you had 2 out of the 3 questions, and I've dealt with your questions. Please allow the rest of us to have a meeting about the Arab revolutions, which is what we came here to have. In Bahrain, the young man is anxious about Bahrain being the first of the Arab revolution in the GCC area. But of course, if Bahrain succeeds in having a revolution, it might be the first, but it will not be the last. Because if the 231-year royal dictatorship in Bahrain is swept away, the other dictatorships in the GCC area will also be swept away. This whole process of knocking away pillar after pillar. Now, there are some people trying to play sectarian cards, not the young man, of course. There are some people who say this is a Shiite revolution in Bahrain. Well, it's true that the Shiites are the big majority, as a matter of fact, of the population in Bahrain, whilst having no political power at all. But that doesn't concern me at all. I'm not interested in whether somebody is a Shiite or a Sunni or a Christian or a Jew. I'm interested in bringing down the dictatorship in Bahrain, which suppresses all the people, all of them, Sunni and Shia, in the country.
Arab countries who they should have as their president have come to an end.
The president they get is one that they chose, and that they can remove that president when they no longer wish to have him or her in charge. That's what we ask for ourselves. Indeed, we would accept nothing less. Why should Arabs be any different to us? It was oftentimes said that Arabs were unsuitable for democracy, that Islam was hostile to democracy. Even some Islamic extremists argued that voting was haram, democracy was forbidden, and all of this rubbish. It's all been washed up by the events of the last 3 months. In fact, another person who's been washed up by these tides of history is Bin Laden and Zawahiri and all these other Salafist haters of democracy, who believe that by substituting themselves for the mass of the people, by exploding themselves and other people, they could free their people, when all along the answer to the dictatorships in the Arab world was there on the streets, in the houses, in the workplaces, in the students, in the universities of their people. Once people move, and this is the example of Iran. You see, the tyrant Shah was all powerful. His SAVAK security apparatus, absolutely terrifying and fearsome. But when the Iranian people moved in their millions upon millions, no dictatorship can stand up against it. The soldiers cannot shoot millions, and they only have 6 or 12 or 18 bullets in their magazine. If they kill 12 or 18, they'll be torn to pieces by the other millions that they didn't manage to shoot. So there comes a point in this building of this critical mass where the dictators fall, and that will happen in other Arab countries too. The fear that exists in the West about Islamic government coming to power in Egypt, say, or Tunisia, is completely misplaced. First of all, the powerful and popular Islamic parties in Tunisia and Egypt are not the Taliban. They're not Al-Qaeda. They are a government, or would be a government, comparable to the government of Erdogan in Turkey, which I happen to believe is the best government in any Muslim country. And if all the Muslim countries had a government like that, it would be a big step forward. And I believe, as a prediction, that that's what will happen. That the president of Egypt will not be from the Muslim Brotherhood, because they've already announced that they will not stand for that position. But the Muslim Brotherhood is the most popular and powerful political force in Egypt. What's wrong with that? Egypt is an overwhelmingly Muslim country. What's wrong with them choosing democratically a Muslim government? It's our job to deal with whomsoever the people of Egypt or Tunisia choose. And that's what I hope that we will do. There's some very fertile thinking going on. In Tunisia, for example, the leader of the Islamic movement, Sheikh Rashid Ghannouchi, spent a long time in exile in London. We learned much from him. And he is proselytizing in Tunisia now, having returned to the country, for a red-green alliance of Labour and the left and the Muslims coming together as a powerful political force which can stabilize the new democracy in Tunisia. And I personally wish it all the best. Capitalism ineluctably leads to injustice and war. I have believed this all of my life, but I can't wait or ask others to wait for the overthrow of capitalism. Well, go on and bring them down. I don't know why you're shouting at me. Go on then. You really are winning friends and influencing people, I must say. Let me give you a tip as someone who's been a long time in politics. You're making enemies of all the people in this room, and that's not a good idea. It's really not a good idea. Go and pursue Ahmadinejad. Many of the people in here will go with you, but don't destroy their meeting because of your selfish preoccupation with your own issue, which I've already dealt with in 2 long interventions. It's just a tip, just a bit of advice. What we can't do is wait until we have a resource-based economy before bringing down dictatorships or fighting against war and for peace. These are linked, but they are not the same thing. And so, whilst I'm happy to look at your documentary, I don't think it's key in any way to these big struggles that we face today. Certainly Britain and America in particular, with their dependence on finance capital. I don't know if you've seen the movie that won an Oscar a couple of weeks ago called An Inside Job, narrated by Matt Damon, which is an absolutely fantastic movie if you haven't seen it. I'm sure it's not as good as your documentary, but An Inside Job, it's very, very good. And Capitalism, a Love Affair with Michael Moore. These are things that we must study, but they're not the same thing as the issue that we are discussing tonight. And with respect to the sister who talked about Wisconsin, and of course I am wholeheartedly behind the labor unions in Wisconsin, we really cannot compare the dictatorship of Hosni Mubarak with the governor of Wisconsin. We really can't, and we do an injustice actually to the Egyptian people by implying that these are the same things. The labor rights of the public sector workers in Wisconsin were hard fought, hard won, have been hard lost, but one day will be won again. But in the United States there is freedom to organize and to vote. It's not used very well, and it's distorted and perverted by money and by many other things. But it's not the same thing as the dictatorships that we are talking about tonight. However, I can tell you this. On Wednesday morning, I begin a weekly radio show on Radio WBAI in New York in the tri-state area every Wednesday morning at 9 o'clock, right after Democracy Now! I hope it will be syndicated throughout the land and here in Canada in time also. And these issues of labour rights and human rights and economic rights and political rights for the peoples of North America will feature very highly on the kind of issues that I'll be discussing on that radio show. Thank you.
Opposing intervention by governments from the West, and I'm reluctant to, get into that kind of thing, but the rebels themselves are asking for it. And it seems, and they have predicted that Gaddafi will kill about 500,000 people, because the people who are in the east part of the country have said they are not going to go down without a fight. So it's not going to be a case of 500 or 1,000 or 2,000 leaders being killed. It's going to be a lot of ordinary people on the street who have supported this revolution. So what do we do?
Thank you very much. Sir?
Who are standing on the streets and have been there since February 14th. And now the Saudi forces are entering in Bahrain and they are trying to crush the movement over there. Similarly, if the same thing happens in Benghazi, and Gaddafi with all his evil forces comes and crushes the people over there, then as you said that the critical mass has already been achieved over there in this revolutionary period, what we are seeing in the year 2011. So after, God forbid, if crushing the people in Bahrain and in Benghazi, so will that be sending a message to all over the people who are willing in the GCC and other Arab areas, that will it be sending a negative message to them? And secondly, before the tsunami in Japan, all the UN and the European Union, they were having their meeting for a no-fly zone. But this catastrophe in Japan, it is a catastrophe, and we are feeling sympathy for the Japanese people and all the damage created over there. But right now, after that tsunami, all the attentions of the media and the people have been diverted towards Japan. And that no-fly zone and all the Arab League's consent about the no-fly zone all have gone in the backyard. So if this no-fly zone hasn't been imposed, then my sister said that Gaddafi will be coming over there. So we, being the peace-loving people all over the world, will be watching this massacre over there. And what can we do? So are we going to watch this as a swift phenomenon, or we can do something?
Thank you very much. And sir?
To some extent, the young man from Bahrain you have
confidence in yourself. You know, the idea that in the Gulf the people are too stupid to have democracy, too concerned about other things. I mean, how stupid do you have to be a democracy? Is the United States, Canada, Britain, are the people in these countries endlessly thinking about discussing the way that they want their country to be run? No, they vote every now and again and then go back to the television. Arabs are no different to anybody else in that regard. And it's simply not true that the youth in Egypt are better educated than they are in Saudi Arabia. In fact, the opposite is the truth. Saudi Arabia has more graduates than any other Arab country. And by the way, 60% of all Saudi Arabian graduates are women. So it's simply not true that the Saudi people are too stupid or preoccupied by trivial things to achieve democracy. And you really must have more confidence in yourselves. Not to think that if you get rid of a dictatorship that's been there 230 years, you might alienate yourself from other dictatorships. To hang with all the dictatorships, show the way, lead the way, light the path. That's what the spirit should be. The young woman who spent 30 years opposing foreign intervention in what they call third world countries, you really should make it 31, sister. It's first, there are many reasons why we must oppose Western governments and armies getting involved in fighting in yet another Arab and Muslim country. There are many, many reasons why we must oppose that. I did an interview in The Guardian last Saturday. You can look it up, guardian.co.uk, a debate with a Conservative MP on this very subject, in which I said the best way to come to the aid of the Libyan revolution is for Egypt and Tunisia to open their borders and for Arab volunteers to flood in their hundreds of thousands into Libya and to take up the side of the Libyan revolutionaries. Somebody said, well, they won't be trained. Well, the Arabs who went to Afghanistan in the 1980s, most of them had never been involved in a war before. But as the former Soviet Union would tell you, they proved quite a formidable fighting force. The only people who have a right to intervene in the Libyan revolution are the Arab masses. That's the long and the short of it. And don't be seduced by this talk of a no-fly zone. First of all, Gaddafi winning or not winning the war does not depend upon air power. In fact, the number of sorties being flown by the very small Libyan Air Force is declining, not escalating. Some rebel leaders are asking for a no-fly zone. Others are saying, keep out of our internal affairs. There's a huge banner in the square in Benghazi saying in terms, for God's sake, don't give us any humanitarian intervention, whatever you do. The situation is that a no-fly zone, as we discovered in Iraq, is not a declaration that the country concerned must not fly its aeroplanes. Because if it does fly its aeroplanes, you have to shoot them down. And in order to shoot them down, you have to first attack their air defense systems, which are situated in the center of Tripoli and in the center of cities. By doing so, you will kill people. But let's assume that the air defense systems are attacked. The airplanes are shot out of the sky, and the war continues, and Gaddafi continues to win it. What's next? Well, we know what's next. What's next is a Western invasion and occupation of Libya, which is precisely the opposite of what we should be fighting for. The reason the West desperately turned against Gaddafi after 10 years of treating him as a milk cow, sucking billions from the people of Libya, was they felt that this revolution was going to succeed and they should get involved because they wanted to protect their investments. BP, British Petroleum, which was stolen from the Iranian people, by the way, in the 1950s. The BP has invested $15 billion in the south of Libya and now runs the risk of losing all of it, because I don't think Libya is going to be that keen on British capitalist companies after all this is over, one way or the other. So a no-fly zone will be ineffectual, it's conceptually wrong, it's wrong in principle, and it can only lead to yet another Western involvement in an Arab and Muslim country. The best thing is for the Arab masses to come to the rescue. And I believe that that is happening and will happen. And I don't believe that Benghazi will be taken. I think Benghazi, we may well have a situation now for some years of two Libyas. People say, well, do you want to have two Libyas? I say no, but I'd rather have two Libyas, one of which is not ruled by Gaddafi, than have one Libya that's completely ruled by Gaddafi. That's my solution. I hold the two highest civil awards in Pakistan, the Hilal-e-Quaid-e-Azam and the Hilal-e-Pakistan, both of them, for my work on the subject of Kashmir. I was for many years the Secretary of the National Lobby on Kashmir in Britain. I have regularly spoken around the world, in the United States and Britain, on the subject of Kashmir, where for more than 50 years a United Nations Security Council resolution which promised the people of that occupied territory a plebiscite so that they could choose their national self-determination has been denied. And 100,000 people have died in the last 20 years in the Intifada in Kashmir. 80,000, I say 100,000, but 80,000 or 100,000, it is an extraordinary level of casualties and thousands of prisoners, the use of rape as a political weapon, and so on. It is the biggest occupation army in the whole world. 600,000 Indian soldiers occupy the occupied land of Kashmir. So I am, my friend, very mindful of that subject. I didn't raise it tonight because, like Iran, it's not the subject of the meeting, but I'm glad that you chose the opportunity to raise it. I think WikiLeaks was very important. I think that WikiLeaks and the Palestine Papers, which were leaked more or less at the same time, have helped to knock away the bricks of these dictatorships, not least because they undermined the confidence of these regimes when they saw what the Americans really think about them, which is not much. They didn't think much of the British either, so they are undiscriminating in their offensiveness in that regard. But I think that the separation of Sudan into North and South is very much to be regretted. I think that a big job was done on Sudan to try and undermine it and weaken it by Israel, by the West, over many years, supporting the secessionist tendencies which always existed in the South. And this job intensified when Sudan discovered that it was sitting on top of a huge ocean of oil, and worse, oil that it already sold to the People's Republic of China rather than on the international oil market priced in dollars. So I very much regret that Sudan is now two, but we have to accept it. It is, there was a plebiscite, it was overwhelming. The South has now broken away, and I can only wish them well and hope that they are governed justly and democratically and that their people prosper. But in general, I'm against breaking up countries. I think in the world today we should be seeking more and more unity amongst peoples rather than separation and separatism. It's one of the reasons why I'm against Scottish separation, and I'm standing in the Scottish Parliament elections on the 5th of May in a few weeks' time. On exactly that platform, we'll see what the people's verdict is. On the subject of Bahrain, I say to the sister not to be despondent. It'll take more than 1,000 Saudi soldiers. It'll take more than 500 policemen from the UAE. I didn't know that the UAE had sent policemen. I think that's very regrettable, and that the UAE may come to regret it. But it will take more than all of that to stop the revolution in Bahrain. I think the people have decided. They have lost many martyrs. Hundreds of Bahrainis have been killed, whilst the US Fifth Fleet is anchored in Bahrain. They're talking about a no-fly zone in Libya, while their own fleet is in the country that's gunning down unarmed, peaceful demonstrators in the streets, including women and children killed in the dead of the night. So my hope is, and my belief is, that the people of Bahrain will continue their freedom struggle, and the more Saudi Arabia commits itself to propping up the dictatorship in Bahrain, the more quickly they will bring about the defeat and destruction of their own dictatorship, which would be, in many senses, the biggest prize of them all. The unfreest country in the world invading another unfree country to destroy the democratic movement there, at the invitation, one assumes, of Secretary Robert Gates, who's just been visiting the country. You really couldn't make it up when relating to the land of the free and the home of the brave. On the question of Palestine, I reiterate the point that James Clark made, which is the Summer University of Palestine on the 23rd of July. You can get details at the table outside or on our website, vivapalestina.org. This will take place at the American University of Beirut, which, for those of you who know the AUB in the heart of Beirut, is a bit like being in the Sorbonne in 1968, in the middle of the great revolutionary upheaval. It will be the place to be. And it's not just for young people either. It's for the young of heart, whatever age they are. You can join the university, you can pay for the week, or you can also sleep there in the student accommodation and dormitories, excellent dormitories in the AUB, which is a very prestigious and beautiful place. The best speakers on Palestine will come from all over the world, and activists from all over the world will come to hear them speak and to debate and argue with them. And no doubt under the stars and under the leaves of the beautiful gardens at the AUB, there'll be lots of revolution in the air and music in the cafes at night. If I haven't painted an enticing enough picture, let me just tell you that I'll be there throughout. Thanks very much indeed. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you again, Mr. Galloway, for your inspiring words. And I'd like to thank everybody for coming out tonight, and to remind you to please take a look at the tables that we have set up at the lobby, and any contributions you can make to help us cover this event. That would be wonderful as well. Thank you and have a good night.
Thank you so much.